Let's start with the docker-compose.yaml file. So I am using version 3.5 of Docker Compose, and these are the list of services, and these are the list of networks. So I am creating a JMeter network with name JMeter, driver bridge, and this is the subnet range, and this is the gateway IP. Then in the services section, there is this Redis service which will use this image, Redis latest from the Docker Hub. The container is Redis, and the command after running this Redis container, which will be executed, is this command. So it will basically run a Redis container with the password Redis @alpana, and then the certificate file and the key file. Then the Redis service will be accessible on port 6379 on localhost. The certificate and key file of SSL is mapped as a Docker volume to this Redis container. The certificate and key file is present in our local system under the repository directory under Redis folder. Then this Redis service will be deployed in the network JMeter with this IP address. Next is InfluxDB service. InfluxDB service will use this image, container name, the environment file. So the environment file, which is present here in the directory, which will contain the initial setup to start the InfluxDB. So username, password, organization, bucket, token. Then also we will map the dashboard directory, which will contain the InfluxDB dashboard template file. So that based on this template file, we can create the dashboard later. Also the Docker volume directory, which is basically nothing but it will map the InfluxDB data on our local system. So InfluxDB service will run on port 9086 on our local system, but it is mapped to 8086 in the Docker network. So the InfluxDB service will be deployed in the JMeter network, JMeter Docker network, and with this IP address. Next service is Grafana. Grafana service will use this image. This is the container name. It will use the JMeter network with this IP address. The port is 3000 on localhost, and environment file is here, which will contain the username and password for the Grafana UI. Then also we will map the provisioning folder and the dashboard folder. So provisioning folder contains the configuration for setting up the data sources like InfluxDB in our case, and dashboard folder contains the dashboard configuration, like on which directories the dashboard JSON files are present. So these two directories are mapped as a Docker volume. So Grafana service depends on the InfluxDB service because InfluxDB is used as a data source for Grafana. Then the next service is JMeter Server 1. Now it is using this image. This is the container name. The command is server, and the network it is using is JMeter with this IP address. The volumes are this. So we are mapping the repository directory to this JMeter server Docker container so that we can have access to test files and the configuration files. Also, we are mapping the Java key store file, which is present in the Redis folder. This Java key store file imports the Redis imports the certificate for the Redis database server, so that this certificate of Redis database is a trusted certificate. Then the log file, so JMeter server log file will be mapped to our local host system, our local system with this file name. And it depends, JMeter Server 1 service depends on the Redis service as well as InfluxDB service. So first, when Docker Compose sees this, first Docker Compose will deploy Redis container and InfluxDB container, and then it will deploy the JMeter Server 1 container. Then the next service is JMeter Server 2. So we have two servers in this distributed environment of JMeter. So yeah, service JMeter Server 2, similar to JMeter Server 1. Then we have JMeter Master, which is also quite similar to JMeter Server 1, Server 2, except that depends on. So first JMeter Server 1, Server 2 will be up, and then the JMeter at last JMeter Master will be up. So yeah, this is the overview of docker-compose.yaml file. Also, the tests are there in the tests folder in repository directory. I have created a sample JMeter test, which will basically test the HTTP bin API. I will mention the HTTP bin API documentation website in the video description. And this test will communicate to Redis database to save the test data. And also it will connect to InfluxDB to send the test result matrix. So yeah, that is the overview of the Apache JMeter distributed environment using Docker Compose.